Sahih Al Bukhari, the Book of Belief, Chapter 22, Religion is Ease. Narrated by Abu Hurairah, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Indeed, the deen is ease, and no one overburden himself in the deen except that it will overwhelm him. So strive for balance and moderation, aim to come as close as possible, and be hopeful. Seek assistance with worship in the early morning, evening, and part of the night." Brief commentary. Islam is a religion of ease, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, encouraged gentleness in actions and advised people to only take on what they can handle and maintain consistently. He emphasized moderation in worship, avoiding excessiveness and undue burden. Believers are encouraged to pray and worship with energy and enthusiasm, without overburdening or harming themselves, and without going extreme in prayer or other acts of worship. In the Quran, Allah Almighty revealed this verse to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to convey to the people, saying, "Say, I do not ask you for any reward for it, nor am I of those who overburden themselves." In the beginning of this hadith, our Prophet, peace be upon him, established this great principle, saying, "Indeed, the deen is ease." Allah Almighty also says, "So fear Allah as much as you are able. Allah has made it easy." As He says, Allah intended for you ease. He did not make it burdensome and difficult, but rather straightforward and manageable, without hardship. Allah removed the burdens and shackles that were imposed on those before us. Thus, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Indeed, this religion is ease," meaning it is made to be easy. In the Prophet's statement, no one overburdens himself in religion except that it will overcome him. He cautions against making religion too hard on oneself by taking on acts of worship that can only be done with great difficulty. Religion is not practiced by overwearing it. Anyone who takes an extreme approach will be overwhelmed and give up. It means that if a person dives deeply into religious practices without gentleness, he will ultimately become exhausted and be defeated by it. The Prophet, peace be upon him, also said, "Beware of extremism in religion, for those before you were destroyed by extremism in religion." The phrase, "except that it will overcome him," means that the religion will overpower him. The religion is strong, broad, and has many acts of worship. If someone tries to burden himself with every recommended act, along with the obligatory duties, he will tire himself and take on more than he can bear. Rather, one should take on what is manageable. This does not mean that seeking excellence in worship is discouraged, for that is praiseworthy. Instead, it warns against excess that leads to boredom and engaging so much in voluntary acts that one neglects more important ones or even delay an obligatory act, like someone who spends the whole night in prayer, fighting off sleep until it overtakes him, causing him to miss a Fajr prayer in congregation, delay it beyond its preferred time, or even miss it until after sunrise. Thus, whoever tries to make religion hard on himself by taking on what he cannot sustain will find that the religion will overcome him because he cannot keep up with it. This may lead him to abandon worship or to feel exhausted and averse. When the Prophet said, "So aim for balance," it means to strive to hit the correct target, aiming to reach the truth in a moderate and balanced way. This encourages performing good deeds and acts of worship properly, without excessiveness or neglect, and avoiding overburdening oneself. And him saying, "and come as close as you can," means to get as close to the right path as possible. If achieving perfection in worship or action is not possible, then one should try to approximate it, meaning to put in effort and aim to do what is achievable and manageable, without falling into extremes or placing on oneself what cannot be sustained. Here are some practical examples of applying the principle of aiming for balance and approximation in action of worship, which helps a Muslim to adhere to worship moderately without excessiveness or negligence. For example, in prayer, aiming for balance. This means performing the obligatory prayer on time with the required focus, and trying as much as possible to observe the Sunnah practices, such as the regular Sunnah prayer and additional voluntary prayers. Approximation. If someone struggles with maintaining concentration in prayer, they can strive to achieve as much as focus as possible without exhausting themselves in aiming for complete perfection in every unit of prayer, while gradually working on improving their prayer over time. Also, for example, in reading the Quran, aiming for balance. This means dedicating daily time to read a specific portion of the Quran and strive to reflect on the verses and their meanings. Approximation. If a person is unable to read a complete portion each day, They can read half a portion or several verses, depending on their capacity, while maintaining regularity instead of overdoing it and then discontinuing it. This applies to all acts of worship. These examples illustrate that what is required is the effort to reach the best in worship while avoiding commitments that exceed one's capacity or jeopardize their worship. Then the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "And be hopeful," to encourage Muslims to be optimistic and hopeful for Allah's mercy and reward. The call to rejoice follows the encouragement to aim for balance and approximation, so that believers feel assurance and comfort. Allah is merciful and appreciates even the small effort a person exerts in obedience, rewarding both the effort and the good intentions. Then he concluded the hadith with a light and beneficial piece of advice, saying, "Seek assistance with worship in the early morning, evening, and part of the night." This is a prophetic guidance to utilize specific times to facilitate worship and perform good deeds without exhaustion. Early in the morning refers to the beginning of the day. The Prophet, peace be upon him, indicates that morning is one of the best times for worship and activity, as a person is at their peak energy and vitality after a night of rest. Evening refers to the time towards the end of the day. This time is suitable for acts of worship or activities that one may wish to engage in after a day of work, as it allows for some time to relax and continue with acts of worship. As for part of the night, it refers to the time of the late night, specifically the hours just before dawn. This time is suitable for worshipping Allah, such as performing the tahajjud prayer or the night prayer, as the tranquility and stillness of the night enhance focus and devotion. Thus, we can conclude from the hadith that the religion is not about the abundance of acts of worship that can become burdensome to the soul, but rather about maintaining balance and consistency in what a person can endure in terms of obedience. By doing so, a servant becomes closer to Allah's pleasure and achieves both spiritual and physical comfort.